people in the United States kind of speaking about the injustices, how the United States has really exploited and used Latin America and its people and its economies. And my wife and I, when we finished, I went to graduate school in Boston, and just a mile or so from Boston College. Used your gym all the time. Andover Newton Theological School in Newton Center.
I live at Newton Center and I live. So
okay, good. Yep. So, and I spent about 5 years as an associate pastor in Rhode Island, but then ended up wanting to get as close to the U.S.-Mexico border as possible. That was our goal, and it really was, not because of the immigration issue. The immigration issue really hadn't surfaced yet. This was in about 1997, 1998, and if you know the history of kind of what's happened along the border, 1994 the free trade agreements were signed, basically right about now, because on January 1st, I think it was the free trade agreements were signed. The U.S. had already started militarizing the border and had started Operation Hold the Line and Operation Gatekeeper in San Diego area, and then over in El Paso. I think it started in El Paso. They knew, the trade ministers knew that there was going to be unprecedented immigration that was going to happen as soon as the free trade agreements were signed. In fact, the indigenous people in Chiapas and Latin America were protesting. I was in El Salvador at a big protest, and everybody knew that the economies of Central America and Mexico were going to be destroyed. The farmers would no longer be able to compete with farmers in the United States once it became an open field. And so all of these things started happening, and by 1998, when I moved here, the immigration had started. You got to think of the U.S.-Mexican border as a big balloon, the kind of balloons that the clowns tie up and all of that. So the Border Patrol can put pressure here and they can put pressure here, but that means that everybody moves to where they're not. And so that's exactly what happened here. This valley, this incredible valley, the Santa Cruz Valley, has always historically been an immigration funnel. It's just a natural funnel from the Sierra Madres, pulling people and flowers and seeds and animals and birds. This mountain right here, this mountain range, is one of the it's a bird sanctuary. Birds from all over the world immigrate through here, and bird watchers from all over the world come just to see the birds that immigrate through here. So that started happening, and by 2000, we moved here in 1998. By 2000, the church people, and it really was church people, people of faith, people of conscience that came together in 2000, and we started asking questions of, we're finding people in our communities that are walking through, what do you do when you find people dying in your neighborhoods? And so there were about 70 of us that met at the Quaker Meeting House in Tucson on Pentecost Sunday in the afternoon, and started talking about, well, what should we do? And we decided we needed to do two things. One was we needed to have some sort of humanitarian response. But we decided, well, let's start putting water out in the desert. And the other thing we decided we needed to do was that the Border Patrol was the only voice on immigration. They had dominated the press, and anytime the press needed a quote about immigration, they would go to the Border Patrol. We wanted to create an alternative voice because we were hearing other stories from migrants. And so we decided those two things. We started putting water out, and immediately the Border Patrol didn't like that. They started saying, well, they called us in and so we went and met with the Border Patrol, and they brought in all the key sector chiefs, and we had a conversation, and they didn't want us to put water out, but a lot of the old time Border Patrol were saying, we didn't sign up to be Border Patrol to pick up dead bodies in the desert. And so after a lot of conversation, and one of our pastors said, if we can't put water out in Jesus' name, then this country has far bigger problems. And so they kind of reluctantly decided, we can't stop you. And so we started putting water out in a lot of places, and we actually got permission from a lot of federal land managers, like the National Wildlife Monuments, like Oregon Pike National Monument. We got permission from their refuge manager to put water out, and we actually had a contract to put the water out. This is somebody from the federal government that's giving us permission and making us sign a contract that we will put water out, and we have to have water out there in those barrels. We use these big old Coke barrels that we recycled. We painted them blue. We put a 30-foot flag conduit, electrical conduit with a blue flag. Blue is very, it's not a color you see often in the desert, and it's kind of a universal symbol for water. And so we started putting those up. And at one time we had about 130 of those out all over in the desert on land that we had permits, which is important because you were beginning to build this understanding in the desert lands that people didn't want. A lot of these, I know you have spoken with some ranchers, and ranchers didn't want people to die, and so they would give water. So that was one of our first projects, and it really got people engaged. But what happens when you start being out in the desert, putting water out? We started finding migrants. And so we started bringing what we call migrant packs, which is basically some granola bars, water, Gatorade, some things to give to people if we found them. And we also started bringing medical equipment so that we could do medical care. And so, we started doing that, and we started finding lots of people, and eventually there was a group, some of the people in the group said, well, we don't want to just put water out. We want to focus more on finding migrants and giving them humanitarian care. So one of the first groups that was developed, an offshoot of Humane Borders. Humane Borders was the group that was putting water out. A group broke off and started the first Samaritan group. And so as social workers, a lot of it is just how do you get your feet into an issue, start finding a way to be of help, to give care to people, but it develops and it grows, and so that's what we have found, is that we're constantly evaluating what we're doing. In fact, in liberation theology, we call it see, judge, and act. So you're always looking, you're always evaluating, and then you're always acting. And it's a circle. You always are see, judge, and act. It's a constant reflection. You're constantly reflecting on what you're doing. You're constantly doing something, and then you're circling back and seeing what you're doing. Is it having any effect? And so the Samaritans started going out, and all of these projects attract people. You need vehicles. You need supplies, and from a faith perspective, we just go out and do this stuff, and we expect that somehow the money will follow.